At the start of World War II, the Allies were on the run and pushed back by the blitzkrieg tactics of the Germans. Britain and its allies needed to turn the tide, and fast. At a large manor house by the name of Trent Park, its owner, Sir Philip Sassoon, had passed away in 1939. British intelligence took control of the house after his death and began using it for operations in 1940. They used it for keeping high-ranking German U-boat and Luftwaffe prisoners of war detained. Trent Park was a luxurious manor house with large gardens and a grand interior. Not a place one would expect prisoners of war to be kept. The prisoners were kept to a room and allowed to socialize in a common area in the house. They were supplied with alcohol, fine food and all the luxuries. Why? The Geneva Convention was in force at that time, and so certain standards by international law were to be upheld. However, this treatment was above and beyond the Geneva Convention. British intelligence opted to take a soft approach, to give them the best of care to get the German officers to relax in their surroundings. The German prisoners were under no illusion. They often discussed how they were certain they were under surveillance. But they still, even believing they were being eavesdropped on, had conversations between themselves about guarded secrets. This is where the British tactic of kindness starts to pay off. The British had the house and gardens wired. They hid the wiring behind walls and skirting boards and had microphones in light fittings, fireplaces, trees and other hidden places. During the summer of 1940, the German captives were settled in their surroundings. The British intelligence officers would take them away for interrogation. Now this is not the interrogation you would expect. They would take them to a room and ask them questions. The German officers, under no real pressure, would say nothing and remain loyal to their Führer. However, they were so comfortable in their surroundings and within the system, guess what? They went back to their compatriots and tell them all about the interrogation. Do you know what I have just been asked? I have been asked about X, Y and Z, but I didn't tell them. So the Battle of Britain took place between summer 1940 and autumn 1940. It was a sustained period of German bombing of the British mainland. The Germans had designed a bombing navigation strategy called Knickebein. This was a targeting method where two beams were transmitted from Nazi-occupied Europe to a location in Britain. Where these two beams crossed, the German bomber knew where to drop its payload. This made German bombing sorties very accurate. However, over at Trent Park in the summer of 1940, a German pilot had boasted to his friends that he had stayed strong and not told his captors of such a device. But of course, the microphones were listening in. As soon as British intelligence overheard that conversation, they got to work straight away. One of those plucky British boffins got to work and managed to ever so slightly bend one of the beams. Just a tiny adjustment in one of the two beams put the Luftwaffe off by about half a mile. British civilians would emerge from their shelters and wonder why their back garden or terraced house had been targeted, when the munitions factory down the road was unscathed. This allowed the British to move the German bombers away from vital infrastructure. Had their system have been working on target, the British and their ability to fight the war would have been decimated. Without that small adjustment to their system, the Battle of Britain may have belonged to the Luftwaffe and Britain would have been an isolated island ready for the taking. This kind of story, where the smallest of things go in the favor of the Allies, is strewn throughout World War II. All these little victories added up to the final victory in Berlin and subsequent VE Day. The Germans never worked out that the British had done this to their guidance system. The records on this whole operation were not released till only recently. To be fair, Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe, was being fed false and inflated information from his second-in-command, but that is a whole other story. But, let's take a minute to consider the people that made such an operation possible. The men and women sat in the basement of Trent Park. This team in the basement lived in much less luxury compared to the German prisoners above. This basement would have been the old servants' quarters and workplace when the house was built. It was dark with low ceilings. The people listening in from the basement were mostly German refugees, so their first language was German. This made them great at taking notes of all the conversations. The Germans working in the basement for the Allies were also mostly Jewish and had escaped the Holocaust. Listening to their native German counterparts above strutting around champagne in hand must have been hard. These people had been forced from their homes and so decided to work for the Allies. There were some real highs and lows listening into the conversations above them. Whilst they would get vital information to help the Allies in their gathering of intelligence, At times they would hear the German prisoners boasting about the Holocaust. So whilst the men and women in the basement had a job to do, that job was much tougher listening into the awful treatment of the Jewish population in Germany. All the while in the knowledge that some of their families were unable to get out of Germany before the war. Whilst we must celebrate their work in gaining valuable secrets from the German war machine, we should also spare a thought for the times they had to listen into the conversations they overheard in regard to the German treatment of their fellow Jewish comrades stuck in Germany and Europe. Whilst they were able to change the bombing strategy of the Luftwaffe in 1940 with their intelligence collection, they were powerless to save millions of Jews stuck in German occupation until 1944 and 1945. So, there we have it, the British, through kindness and luring their German captives into a false self-sense of security, managed to gain vital intelligence which most certainly changed the course of the war. They could not have done it without the brave German men and women who had been forced from their homes in Germany, to end up in Britain working away in the dark basement at Trent Park. If you want more stories from recently declassified documents or want to learn more about the operation at Trent Park, check out the links below. If you liked this video and want more of history's lesser-known stories, please consider smashing the like button and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, take care and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.